What you'll see today on the portal is actually something that we've had internally for a while now. It's exactly the same interface and platform that we've been using and building on top of. The objective of finding vulnerabilities and giving you an opportunity to do meaningful risk reduction remains the core focus here. We believe, access to the data that we see, which is quite literally what the portal is for us, is how we'll represent some of the insights that we learn in a meaningful way for you to see. Because we have a lot of plans on building more things, many ideas in improving visualizations and making data interesting and accessible to you. But we don't want to wait until, one day we're ready and suddenly you get this big, beautiful thing. Instead, what we have now, we think, is honestly really good and can help you meaningfully reduce some of your risk. You'll be able to answer if a scan is running right now even. You'll be able to know from a historical perspective how many scans I've run and how long they've taken. And most crucially, what is the actual results? What are the data that we've collected up for interpretation? So if you were to log into the portal, you will land up on a dashboard that looks something like this. The URL is portal.active.watch. And what you're looking at right now is a demo tenant that I've configured for this webinar. Some of this data is obviously not real, but the point is really so that I can show you what kinds of insights you might be able to see. At first glance, the idea with the dashboard here is to just get a quick view of how far we've come and sort of what's happening. The dashboard and the portal in general has this concept of a timestamp or a snapshot. And the first thing I'd draw your attention to would be at the top, this current snapshot thing. This being a demo tenant, I only have one snapshot, but the idea here is for every single scan that would have finished or snapshot that we would have taken, these little dates would be highlighted. And if you were to click on them, the whole context changes of the portal to that day. This is an exceptionally important feature to us because it means we can go back in time in terms of seeing how things looked in history. We've had cases where a SharePoint service is not available today, but actually if we look back 2 weeks ago, we realized that there was a SharePoint service. The result is it was actually flaky when we were scanning, but we've had whole data we can refer to and find it. So knowing that the current snapshot is the context for the view you're looking at is quite important. If you were to click through that, you'll see some data change in the middle here. The middle view here is really just how much data for the different categories that we collect do we have for that snapshot. As we do more scanning, we sort of have a view to go how much of some type of data we've collected do we have in the platform altogether. There are only 2 snapshots here, but the idea is that in the beginning it was 5, later we had 22 subdomains that we enumerated. Our expectation here usually is that this remains fairly consistent, but it's a good indicator to know if there is more things to look at or potentially less. The dashboard aside, one of the other really important features is the ability to see what the scope is that we have in for you. A good starting scope really sets us up for success in finding more things. A reminder that the core of ActiveWatch is a bunch of automation, where we start with what we call seed assets, the view you're looking at right now, and we expand on those things as far as possible. A really good seed assets list is where we have maximum opportunity to find things. It's useful for you to see this in terms of what are we actually looking at. And if the question is it an ActiveWatch, this will be the view in which you can come to and confirm. You can filter and change things as you wish, like you would expect any web app to do. But this is something that you can take a look at. The reason why we're quite excited about this thing is the ability to know that something may have changed later is definitely faster if it's part of your process that you have internally. Maybe there is some infrastructure you've decommissioned or you've added some new things, and you just want to make sure that it's part of this portal. Here is the view in which you can confirm that that is true. Okay, so with that aside, I'm going to skip the reporting for 1 second because I wanted to move fairly quickly over to some of the detail that you will see. If you were to expand the tools section on the left edge here, you'll see some of the tooling that we use as part of the automated workflows that we store data in and surface to you. This is anything from web-based screenshots to details, and we'll click that in a second, to port scanning, to template scanning. All of this sort of detail is something that you can look at. and each one of those views is contextualized to the current snapshot. One of the features that we really like is the ability to take screenshots of websites. So if I was to go into the Go Witness view here, you can fairly quickly scroll through and get a sense of any live web service that we found, visually go through and see if there's anything that seems strange. Is there an admin portal you didn't expect? Is there a dev website that probably shouldn't be on the internet? This is an extremely powerful way to get a quick glance of something that seems off. We use this often to find websites that either look like they may have been built some time ago and didn't get the security attention it might need, or someone left something accidental. Visual cues are great. If we look at this from a more detailed perspective, the other view you might want to take a look at is the HTTPX view. It contains a whole list of all of the URLs we may have found, what their responses were by the time we probed them, and more details. What's great about this is you can filter and find web services that might seem interesting or not in a more detailed view. While we have all of this data in a web UI, something that is really powerful for us and something that we're quite excited about is the ability for you to integrate with us. That is that there is an API in which you can get a full export of this data that you could process programmatically elsewhere. If you just wanted a quick dump of what we have, you can do the export. Could be for the current page or all of the data for this snapshot. Alternatively, if you wanted to programmatically take a look at what this looks like, you can look at the contextual API documentation that you press that button for, with a whole explanation of what the endpoint might look like, what some of the parameter values for this endpoint could be. If you're going to page the API, what are those expectations? But at the end over here, we have small code snippets. Maybe it's a one-time curl command that you want to run, and you just want to get the snapshot so you can process it elsewhere. Or you maybe have a more featureful program and you have some JavaScript or Python that you want to run that integrates with something on a cadence. One interesting case here could be if you wanted to ask an external provider like ourselves, give us access to some sort of port scan data. Now imagine a scenario where you can go to an Nmap view, you open the API documentation, and with one curl command, you sort of have a sense of what ports are open for all of the scope that we have scanned. We're quite excited about that, and I think it opens up quite a few interesting integration opportunities, specifically ones where you might have existing security operations processes and you want to improve on that. Maybe get some extra data, maybe challenge some of the assumptions that you might be making and take it from there. Wouldn't it be really cool if you had a firewall person saying they've made a change in their firewall, and the next time a snapshot comes along, you can do a quick API call and confirm the changes have actually been made. That's the kind of stuff that I think this unlocks for you with just some simple programming or call commands, if you will. Okay, so there are many views, and each one of these views have this kind of data available to you. API integration is a first-class feature. You'll get an API key in your account section at the bottom over here, and away you go. All right. Now, on top of all of these things, we've spoken very quickly about, we have the context for the scan. If you were to change these things and there were older scans, you could view what it looked like then. We know what the scope is, that we get input into that. But maybe sometimes you need to ask more specific questions on this data. For this capability, we've developed something that we're calling our signals engine. And we have the ability to query this data with something that we're calling Squary. So if you went to the query engine on the left-hand side over here, you'll get, if you've used some sort of search tool before, a fairly familiar input box where you can type a query. And in this case, we can ask questions around the data, any data that we have for this specific snapshot right now. Now, if I was to do one quick example, the little hint over here shows you what it might look like. But I could say, for all of the HTTP data that I have, show me responses where the status code was, let me type this, maybe not an HTTP 200. So any response that was potentially a 404 or other type of status code, we can very quickly get some results back. You can add many more classifiers here. Maybe you want something with a specific URL, or there was some path or something in the body. Really, the imagination is sort of the limit over here in terms of the kinds of questions that you can ask on the data. Now, asking questions on data is interesting on itself, but when you think about this, and truthfully, this is something I think we didn't realize the power of initially, is we can ask questions about the state of data. And we can do that going back in time for as long as we have scanned data for it. The reason why I think this is really interesting is if you can imagine a scenario where, and this happens all the time, most recently with the Citrix vulnerability, we don't need to write another scanner or another prober to find out where are our Citrix instances and or what should we do about them. We can very quickly write a query based on the old historical data that we have and get some sort of results, which could be our initial triage point.
Okay, so Leon was showing off these Squarey library. I'm going to take a quick segue just to explain some of the implication of this, I think, for everyone. So if you think about a traditional pen test, or at least what we tell you a traditional pen test is, and let's say it's scheduled for 5 to 7 days, at least the first day, but sometimes the first 2 days, is setting up all of these tools, running them, and going through the output. The fact that all of that is orchestrated for you and available historically is already more useful than we thought it would be. We kind of discounted that because that was easy for us. But what we're finding is that that's very useful for people. You don't now need to go find a technical person who can set up and run these tools across your scope. They are set up and running. As Leon pointed out, you can get that historic information. So some of the examples I imagine based on my own conversations, when you're having that conversation with the IT business owner of an app and they swear blind that the stuff is not on the internet. Now you can log into the portal or have used the API and see whether that is true without waiting for an Nmap scan to complete. You can just go, is it there? Let me search for the host names under something like Subfinder. You say your UAT stuff's not there, but when I type UAT in there, it shows up right at the top. And you can move that conversation on in the meeting without needing to have technical work and move back. If you could give this to your firewall ops team for them to see what the net result of some of the things that they've done are at a ports level. You've made this change. Did it reflect in the ActiveWatch data? Is that port now closed now or not? So having that data is quite useful. And practically one of the things we're offering to you is if you're an ActiveWatch customer and we're doing an external pen test for you, we will reduce the scoping based on the fact that we have this data. We don't need to set up the tools. We don't need to wait for them to run, and we don't need to interpret a lot of that data. So we can do your external pen test much faster using this. And then a little bit of a teaser for something to come, certainly something I'm challenging the team with internally, is how long do we need to have been running ActiveWatch and how many investigations do we need to do to consider this equivalent to an external penetration test? Now, if you've had 20 investigations done across your external scope and we've scanned it 5 times in the last 6 months, it's probably equivalent to what you'd get in an external pen test. I'd love to have a generate pen test button there. So I think that's one of the directions we can go with this, and that this will enable. And then the second fact that all of this data is normalized into a way where you can query it in one go is quite powerful. Anyone who's actually run these tools will know Nmap produces output that looks like this, and Subfinder produces output that looks like this, and nary the two shall meet. The idea that it's all normalized and instantly queryable through this is very useful. And anyone who's ever played with something like Splunk will know being able to iterate and build up on that query over time is incredibly useful, because it's not like a QRadar search where you put that thing in and wait 15 minutes for it to return. You can run something, it comes back instantly, and then you can improve it. And that's in fact how we do the celebrity vulnerability searches that Leon was talking about.
The last thing that I just wanted to mention around the scurry thing, and it's actually something Dominic just mentioned, is you probably won't know how to ask the question initially and how to query this data or what you might be looking for. So the ability to iterate fairly quickly is really important. Fast feedback loops means you can quickly get to answers that you might look for. We can have a very sparse query like this that shows all of the HTTPX data. But as you realize, actually, I want a different body that might have, I don't think we have, oh, we do have some login pages here. Is there anything that has login in it? Run the query. Okay, there seems to be. Maybe I want to show me cases where the CDN, I can see the data here already, but I might be interested in AWS only instances of where a logging page exists. And to the mentioning of celebrity vulnerabilities, the process of using the data that exists implies that we're typically going and figuring out how do we ID a Citrix box, as an example, or a Fortinet, or some applicable technology quickly. What data do we have in ActiveWatch that we can query on, and use that correlation to write a signals query to surface interesting cases. Because all of this data is serialized with JSON, we can often quickly feed them into other scripts. You've seen how these POCs come alive over time. Citrix announces there's a vulnerability. 2, 3 hours later, a researcher has a POC, and not long after that, it's all over the internet. And you can sort of live with that entire life cycle by virtue of just knowing where to start quickly, having a list of things, and then once POCs or more understanding of the vulnerability comes out, we can apply it against that list. It's not about running vuln scans every single time to learn more. We can actually move quite fast with this stuff. Okay, the query engine over here is, like I mentioned, I think it's quite fast. It's not a very expensive thing to ask. It handles very large data sets at the moment. So we do free-form text searches like this fairly easily on all of the HTTP bodies that we collect so far. And I think it's a fairly powerful thing that initially we didn't realize what we had here until we started using this day to day and truly turned into something. I'll probably start here most of the time and then look at some of the detail. Okay, a quick thing on the library, just for something else that is coming. Because it's so powerful to ask questions on the data, you can see, for example, a more complex query here. It won't have results. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but to give you an idea of what some of these queries might look like, we might want to ask what kind of technologies we may have detected. And this was specific for the React to Shell stuff from end last year. Any headers, any bodies, any sort of artifact that exists within an HTTP case, but true for any of the other tools here. We're speaking HTTP right now, but it could be ports or templates, or Katana here is a web crawler. Maybe one of the URLs is what we can use to fingerprint technologies. Any of those kinds of questions are things you can ask here. Now, what I wanted to say a moment ago was based on the fact that we can save these queries, one of the features that's coming is the ability to alert when one of these queries trigger. We have actually more than one client that have situations where infrastructure is on the internet and the fact that they are routable, publicly routable IP space that they're using. But the infrastructure itself is firewalled out. Like no one except trusted sources should be able to reach those instances. This is a perfect use case for query and the alerting, where we can write a query that says for these IP addresses, if Nmap ever returns data, send me an alert. And the alert will probably be an email or some sort of integration. But the idea is that with every single snapshot that we take, you have a query engine that can ask complex queries. And if things change, send you a notification notifying you that a change has occurred. A long way of saying a port has been opened on this infrastructure. And maybe based on their security requirements, this is a bad thing, and they can react to that quickly. All of this orchestration gets done for you, and the only part you'll need to do, and we'll be happy to help clients with this, is write a query that makes sense and configure an alert for it, and hope it never fires, I guess. But when it does, you get to know beforehand. Okay, so that's the signals engine and talking about the tools. The last part that I wanted to show very quickly is the reporting. So we have the dashboard view over here. Of course, it gets more complicated the more, or it'll be more populated the more scans we do. But sometimes you need to get a sense of, is it running? Is it on? What can you see? So we have 3 reports right now with many more coming. The first one to show very quickly is a scan overview. This is just of all the scans that we've run so far. I have 2 cases over here with a little bit of a graph at the bottom showing how many observations have we managed to collect for that scan and how long did the scan take to run. These are interesting cases for us to see if there is a meaningful difference in the amount of attack surface, or more simply put, observations that we see, but also to understand if we're effectively got the load and performance requirements we have for some of these scans to finish. At the bottom, you'll have a full list of all of the detail of when the scan started and ended, and when the snapshot was finally taken. All the data rows here is that observation count that I mentioned. So really, this report's just an overview of all the scanning that's been done so far. For a specific snapshot, it might be interesting to know what a breakdown is of what we've done. So for this case here, we have a whole bunch of targets that we scanned. We have sort of different types, a bunch of data rows, but on the right-hand side here, there's a bit of a breakdown on where those observations go. Katana being a web crawler, obviously has many data points and often can tell us if there are large complex web apps on the attack surface that we might want to take a look at. And this breakdown goes just for all of the kinds of tools that we have. The most interesting report, I think, is going to be the Snapshot Insights one. In this case, it's really about what do we see? That question of, what are the interesting things that we can learn? I think this report really, for those interested in that, will find it here. In this case report, we can see Amazon S3 is probably where most of the web infrastructure lives. This is clearly an AWS heavy environment that this report's in. And, without needing to dig into the data, we can quickly surface that kind of information. There are smaller breakdowns for other interesting things, how web servers respond, who responds the most, what kind of technologies they're using, etc. And I think there are many more opportunities for us to surface more interesting data. That's, of course, a very web-focused view. There's a version for this for networks and services more generally, a little bit of an infrastructure and DNS view. There are some domains at the bottom, I think. Of course, this is a very small demo tenant, but you sort of get the idea. But the one I really want to draw your attention to is this priority assets view at the end. The idea behind priority assets is not necessarily that these are the most vulnerable or some sort of conclusion like that, but it's really about who is exposing the most stuff, who has the most potential attack surface overall. Now, if someone has the most ports open, it might be by design and that's okay. But it's interesting to ask that question and take a look if that's really necessary. And if it is necessary, why? For most of these, there's a bit of a ranking on who has the most. These are totals. With the template scanner, potentially there is something that has some critical findings, in this case, none. But again, the report tries to surface some things where if you go, we want to reduce our attack surface, where should we start? Maybe this is an interesting place to do that. Okay, so that's sort of most of the features in a nutshell. There are some organizational management stuff as well. If you're an org admin, you can completely self-service the users who have access to this thing, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think those are probably the primary features that I want to show here. One of the more important things is don't forget about the context thing that we have at the top here as the first thing. And then the second, of course, feedback on what kind of reporting is interesting or what some of this data means. It's always useful. A reminder that this is the same platform we're using internally to deliver the service. And I think that's a really important point here where anything that we do to improve this for us internally is something that automatically extends to you as the client. If a view comes better or there's more data that we pull in, there's no second instance we need to manage or something we need to do to extend that value to you. It's automatically part of that benefit that you would get as well. If any of these tools expand, of which there are more coming, it is plugged into this platform. It's how we deliver the service. And it's a decision we've made quite deliberately. Ensure we have one space we can maintain and everyone can extract the value from that. I fully expect some clients to be fairly proactive. Log in, take a look at things, and take stuff off the internet before we can hack it. I think that's fine. It's a good security outcome. If no one gets a chance to compromise it, honestly, that's the best case. If you maybe miss something, hopefully we get it, and we can demonstrate some risk around it. But overall, not losing sight of how we're positioning ActorWatch as a service to aggressively demonstrate risk, while also giving you a view on what we see. That's quite an exciting premise for us, and I hope that resonates with you as well. Okay, the last thing then that I want to talk about before we start going to some questions and answers is the how to get access to this. What you can expect is your account manager reaching out to you to set up a quick onboarding session. Onboarding is very, very simple. The idea is that you'll have one organizational admin, which is also the role that I'm demonstrating here right now. And that organizational admin is able to invite their own users in their own organization. What we need from you is to elect who is the org admin. It can be more than one person if that's necessary. And those people will be able to invite other members onto the platform. Tenants are bound to an email domain, so you can't invite a Gmail or someone from the outside. And there's a very explicit reason for this decision. To make the user management as simple as possible, binding it to your corporate email address, one means it's not another password you need to know, like the way you log in, it'll email you a code. But two, if your colleague leaves for whatever reason, losing access to your email accounts also means you've lost access to the tenant and ActiveWatch. You'll no longer receive the OTP codes to log in. And so we think, as a security company, this gives us a fairly good life cycle of account management without making it too burdensome. If you can make that fairly light, people will probably come back and log in again and not stress too much about another set of credentials or whatever. You will be asked to configure to enroll a 2FA device by virtue of a time-based OTP. But once all of that is done, you probably never need to think about it again. You may have noticed at the top over here, there's this idle button. So this is an indicator of a scan happening right now. Idle implies idle. There's no scan running for our demo tenant right now. But if a scan is live, as in our probers are actively probing your infrastructure as we speak, this changes to it's currently scanning. On top of that, it will also show the current source addresses of where that scanning is coming from. Of course, SOC teams, blue teams, they'll go, is this the ActiveWatch team that's probing us? You can quickly log into the portal and verify potentially the source IP addresses, which we reveal here, so that you can correlate alerts or anything like that that you might have. In a very extreme and unfortunate case, if we're breaking something, I don't think we will, but you never say never. There is the ability to force stop the scanning. So if you were to press the emergency stop here, it's quite a brutal handbrake. Like there's a lot of things in the back end that we stop, predominantly because we don't want to actually break anything. But it is an opportunity if you can't get hold of anyone in time, or it's just that urgent that you want to stop it and deal with a different crisis, then the opportunity exists over there. Today, this is a little bit harder, but as soon as you have access to the portal, you'll be able to stop scans as required. Of course, don't do this unnecessarily. The more we can scan, the more we can probe, the better. But know that this sort of back out mechanism exists, which is really handy. Okay, then the second thing which I glanced over actually very quickly is this investigations card over here on the side. As you know, the point of ActiveWatch is so that we can find vulnerabilities and let you know about those. But more importantly, humans need to verify those vulnerabilities. Take a look at what the detail is. Is there something interesting for us to do here? Sort of take that investigation further. A lot of those investigations imply more of the team get involved, and sometimes 2, 3, 4 hackers sort of focus on one thing and see how far we can take a vulnerability if necessary. This view over here tries to give you a little bit of this card here tries to give you a bit of a view into that process. Practically what you're looking at here is 2 of those investigations have been closed, whatever their resolution might have been, and 1 is open. Now, if a ticket is open over here, these are tickets in the backend that is associated with this tenant. If a ticket is open, it can mean a few things. It could be new, the investigation has just started. Could have been open for a while because we're sort of monitoring the situation a little bit. We might not have enough knowledge. We're sort of waiting for something or, whatever reason that might be. But overall, this sort of gives you a sense that there was manual intervention involved here. People had a look at something and they're sort of working through, in the most case, data that they have seen from the portal itself. So that gives you a little bit of a view in what the investigations pipeline might look like for you. I think some of you are going to be surprised to see how many tickets there are in your tenant. This is a demo one. I created sample tickets to show you, but you sort of get the idea there.
How does one differentiate your traffic from other traffic, i.e. to support investigations or not block your traffic? That's a great question. The most important thing we do is we add a customized header to all of our requests, particularly in the HTTP level. And then the second thing is we have defined IP addresses that we came from. Those are the 2 most powerful ways to work out that it was ActiveWatch traffic generated from us and not something else. Very happy to have a more detailed conversation about that if necessary. We have pen tested this portal and we've put it through its paces. There will invariably be bugs. We think we've got most of them. We've been using this for quite some time. So we think it is in a solid shape and it is available today. We're very excited for you to get your hands on it and play with it and give us your feedback. And we hope that we continue to bring you more and more valuable things as ActiveWatch improves over time. Thank you for your time and patience. I hope you have a wonderful day further.